there was a reset. There was a point where I had gotten into self-development, and I was depressed, I was miserable, and I said, I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired. And you start to go, wait a minute, dopamine is just this experience. Oxytocin is just this experience. Serotonin is just this experience. It's like a code that's written into all mammals, but no one ever talks about it. A version of me and say, by the time that you're 34, you're going to have accomplished everything that you ever wanted. You're going to have the life that you want. And there's a surprise waiting for you. You're not going to be fulfilled. And I'm realizing that this topic of consciousness and happiness, it's almost taboo, where people don't want to talk about it. I've come to the conclusion that happiness is more or less a construct, and there's a spectrum from one end to the other between the most happy that a human being can possibly be. Imagine every happy chemical, the most that they can possibly be expressed all at the same time, or maximum cortisol, and basically you're having a panic attack. I started unraveling my ego. I started unraveling the world in my subconscious of limiting beliefs, the world of human constructs. That moment, if I had to simplify it, it felt like freedom. It felt like freedom to think whatever I wanted to think and feel whatever I wanted to feel in a completely unjudged setting.
I am thrilled to introduce you to one of my very good friends, David Nise. David and I met through a mutual Facebook group where we were sharing insights for our YouTube channels. Yes, David Nise is a YouTuber, and his channel focuses on happiness and the science behind our feel-good chemicals. Since that fateful encounter, David and I have forged a friendship that goes well beyond the creator-to-creator relationship. We've shared our YouTube journeys, insights, and several frustrations that go with growing your YouTube channel. But more than that, we've become genuine friends. Over the last few months, David has inspired me to grow my channel, grow myself, but also think creatively and challenge my creative boundaries. What I appreciate most about David is his honesty. He's never shy about giving me feedback that I need to hear, even if it's not what I always want to hear. Today, I'm excited to share a conversation that David and I had where we discussed the pursuit of happiness. So without further ado, let's welcome the insightful, inspiring, my good friend, David Nise. Hi, David. How are you?
I'm doing great, Shruti. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks for being on this podcast. I'm actually really excited about speaking with you because you and I have had multiple conversations over the last, I don't know, what has it been, 6 odd months November. Or something?
Since November.
Oh, you've been counting? Fair enough. And we've been talking about this topic quite a bit, and it's happiness. But in the mix of this, I've also brought joy and bliss, which I am actually looking forward to talking about. So, David, thank you for joining us. Tell me a little bit about yourself, firstly.
It's so hard for me to say it as a little whenever I think about that question. Just that question alone is extremely complicated for me to answer, unfortunately.
Why is that?
The way that I visualize everything in existence is a lot different than I imagine most other people do. And when I'm asked that question, I always get this gut instinct where I wish that I could just spill out everything that's inside my subconscious and you could have a copy of it and just know this is what David's experienced, this is what David's done, this is what David thinks, this is who David really is. I wish it were that simple to just do a download from me to you and express how that is. Right now, I'm extremely excited about this. This is something that we've talked about repeatedly over and over again. And the interesting thing to me is the topics are ones that they're all subconscious. I can just rattle off about them forever if I want to. And I'll just go ahead and say the breakthrough that I had recently was I've spent a lot of time on Facebook groups just seeing how people talk about different things and how they tend to always argue. And there's always opposing sides in pretty much every argument in one way or another. And one personality trait that I have is I don't like to argue, I don't like to debate, I don't like to hurt people's feelings. Maybe it's a self-preservation thing where I just don't like giving people a hard time or challenging people. I like to let people live their lives and figure it out for themselves and mind my own business. But this business that I'm essentially starting it's becoming more of, I hate to use the word religion, but it's more of like a mindset entirely changing your life, the way that it all works together. And a lot of the ideas, they are completely contrary to what has ever been written or talked about before. And it's a culmination of around 8 years of just conscious thought of how does everything actually work. And it all started off with me wanting to be happy. Really, it was just this idea that I was depressed and I had worked hard my entire life and done everything that I thought I should do. I had a career at the same place for 16 years. I was married with the same person for 16 years. I had the home of my dreams and the children that I always wanted, and everything that I had dreamt or imagined up to that point had been fulfilled. But at no point did I really feel this immense happiness that I imagined I would. It was more of a content feeling, if anything, or it was just stress of going through the day-to-day, dealing with the issues of normal everyday life. It didn't feel like I was really thriving or living this life I dreamed of. And it always confused me, because if you were to take the 18-year-old version of me and say, by the time that you're 34, you're going to have accomplished everything that you ever wanted, you're going to have the life that you want, and there's a surprise waiting for you, you're not going to be fulfilled. You look at it and you go, it feels that way because I know what it costs. I know what it costs now, and the stress, the time, the effort, the money, the hurt feelings between me and my ex-wife. There was a reset. There was a point where I had gotten into self-development, and I was depressed, I was miserable, and I said, I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired. I heard Les Brown say that, and it started this idea in my head where everything that is going to happen in my life is my responsibility to control. I'm an adult, it's no one else's responsibility. Whatever I do is up to me. And that includes where I work, who I spend my time with, what I do with my existence, basically. And up to that point, it was a blueprint, and I'd call it the American dream. I had followed that, what my parents had done, and it wasn't my dream. At no point was it my dream. So I started to go, wow, everything that I know up to this point is wrong for me. And I'm going to dedicate every last effort, every last time that I have to discovering what this is and understanding it at the most fundamental level. And something about me that I've always felt was useful for this was, since I was very little, I've always questioned everything. Why does it work? And then why, to the point where it's annoying, where no one wants to answer you because they haven't thought that deep and you just get stuck. And I never wanted to give up on those whys. One of the jobs that I had later on in my career was a production planner, and part of that was always looking into the future and managing, logistics, min-maxes. Everything was my responsibility to manage, and I was looking out 6 months, a year. And I would go, is this really what I want to be doing 6 months or a year from now? I have this amazing ability to plan, see the future, see complex systems, and simplify them in a way that I've never seen anyone else do before. And I had this idea that I could give that all up. I could give up my entire life, and I could start fresh with a new mindset. And I've been developing that mindset over the years. The original mindset was revolving around a more of like a self-help, personal development mindset. And what I discovered was a lot of it's more hustle culture, more success driven. And those constructs, they're not real for everybody. It's more or less a human made construct that you determine is worth to you or not. And I picked up the pieces of it that made sense to be more successful in my career and progress. But there was a lot of pieces that I had to let go that just didn't make sense to me. I had to find out what my actual dreams were and ultimately how they worked. So that took me into just reading lots of self-help books, and I found a book called Meet Your Happy Chemicals. And I went on a solo trip for the first time in I don't know, it was like 12 years. And I was traveling across the United States in a train with no cell phone service, no Wi-Fi, no distractions, and I had the most peace of mind that I'd ever had in my adult life. I mean, from when I was a kid until that point, that was the most peace I'd ever had. And for the first time, I was actually able to sit through and read a whole book without being interrupted. And there was something about that moment of peace of mind that I felt that there's something about peace of mind that has to do with this puzzle. And it was almost in that moment that I realized peace of mind is the most valuable thing. You can have all the money in the world and you can have all the experiences in the world, but if you don't have peace of mind, you can't really fully enjoy anything or develop anything in your life. It's just a chaos in your head, one way or another. So, a little bit of a pivot. I listened to a lot of Jim Rohn, and one of the things that he said was that when someone walks into your home, the first thing they should go do is find your library. Now, this is a little dated. We don't have libraries anymore. But it introduced this concept to me that whatever's in your brain is an ingredient that is effectively your library in your subconscious. And depending on what you put in there, and everything that comes through your five senses is going to get written in there one way or another. And that becomes the voice in the back of your head, the one that's there, always there for you. And I started thinking, what if my subconscious was malleable to the point where you could program it the way that you wanted to on purpose? Because at this point, it's just a mush of whatever experience I got from life without really thinking about it. On that train, after I read that book about the happy chemicals, I learned that it's almost like a computer program. I imagine an Excel spreadsheet. If I was at work and I was going to write, how does the computer of a human being work? And you take these happy chemicals, you see the experiences, you see how evolution developed mammals over years to use these. And you start to go, wait a minute, dopamine is just this experience. Oxytocin is just this experience. Serotonin is just this experience. It's like a code that's written into all mammals, but no one ever talks about it as it being, binary or cause and effect. And my mind, the way that I think analytically, I was able to, fill in the framework in my head and go, from now on, what if I only focus on doing things that are going to release serotonin? What if I only do things that release, the various happy chemicals? And that turned into realizing that there was a lot of things in my life that only produced stress. And I cut all of them out of my life. I ended up quitting my job. I ended up divorcing my ex-wife. I ended up setting boundaries with everyone in my life, saying that, from now on, I'm here for you, but there's boundaries. I'm not going to be taken advantage of. I'm not going to be unfairly a part of any of these equations anymore, just for the sake of making you feel happy when I'm not satisfied and my expectations are met. So it's more of a taking control of everything in your life, finally. Now, the other book that I read was The Untethered Soul. And that book introduced the idea that we all have the observer inside of our mind, one way or another. And when I think about it, I stopped there. Whenever I first read it, I stopped and I went, I am thinking nothing right now. I am feeling nothing at this moment in time. All I'm doing is observing my five senses. And something clicked. It was like, this observer can be unobjective. This observer can look at the system as a whole and not necessarily use the ego to make decisions. And once that clicked, I started unraveling my ego. I started unraveling the world in my subconscious of limiting beliefs, the world of human constructs. And it's separated now into what does a mammal need, what is the mammal brain programmed to do. But also, we're all logical, very smart human beings that can think of a lot of things. And we have the ability to use our imagination to basically control these two systems. The logic that you can accomplish basically anything if you set your mind to it. And the animal that is going to give you all the parts of life that I genuinely believe are the parts that are worth living. Whenever you get that promotion and you feel the dopamine and the serotonin and all that, it's those happy hormones. Whenever you cry because you've done something that you're so proud of and it's finally working out, that's serotonin and a massive amount of dopamine. It's those feelings. And the only reason why you get to those feelings is because you care in the first place. I've always thought that one of the problems with me and my depression is that I make things too complicated. The expectations in my head that need to be met in order for the worlds to match, they just don't, because I make them too complicated. And I learned that my ego, what I would do is I would put that ego on other people. And whenever they didn't behave in alignment of that, I would judge them and think that they had an issue, when in reality it's all of our responsibility to understand the other person's world for what it is and take it as they present it to you. And I hate to say it, but it took me 30 something years to realize that I wasn't listening to people the way that I needed to. And part of what I'm doing here is I want to listen to as many people explain to me as much as they possibly can, so I can understand consciousness in a way that I never have, because I've really only experienced mine and the close people around me. And I'm realizing that this topic of consciousness and happiness, it's almost taboo, where people don't want to talk about it. And if you were to ask me what really makes you happy, it's knowing that I've done all this work to become the person that I want to be. There isn't any individual one thing. It's me saying that I understand the world. I understand how to work through it, get promotions, become successful, however you want to put it. I have the skill set to accomplish anything that I want. And knowing that gives me the confidence in any situation to know that there's nothing to worry about. I'm going to be safe. And I honestly think that overall fulfillment boils down to confidence. How confident you are in your ability to interact with other people or perform any specific task that you're working on.
No, that's very interesting. So in my view, happiness is something that you find externally, right? Do you feel that because we're fulfilling all our needs externally, that is essentially what makes us happy? When you look at joy and when you look at bliss, for example, and this is something you and I touched on yesterday when I messaged you about this episode, and we talked about enlightenment and feeling and the feeling of bliss. So where in your mind do each one of these, like where do they sit? Happiness, joy, bliss.
So I'm gonna go ahead and just fire a complete contradictory statement that everyone's gonna disagree with. And after thinking about happiness and writing it, the logic of it down, I've come to the conclusion that happiness is more or less a construct, and there's a spectrum from one end to the other between the most happy that a human being can possibly be. Imagine every happy chemical, the most that they can possibly be expressed all at the same time, or maximum cortisol, and basically you're having a panic attack. And joy and the word euphoria, the word fulfillment, they all mean different things to me, and I almost attach happy chemicals to them. So the joy, whenever I think of joy, I always imagine it's a momentary burst of excitement about a situation, and it could be accompanied with adrenaline. If adrenaline accompanies it, like if you were to ride a roller coaster and you feel that dopamine rush and you get off of it and you know that you've survived, it was risky, and it was exciting. For me, I process that as a moment of joy. If my child tells me that they did something good in school and I'm really proud of them, I process that as a moment of oxytocin and a moment of joy. It's a short little burst. Now, whenever I think of the construct of confidence, I feel like that's necessary whenever you're going to be dealing with serotonin. So imagine that I want to build a YouTube channel, and I don't know anything about it. So I read books, I join groups, I buy all the equipment, I sit in front of cameras, I practice every single skill that's necessary to do it. And eventually I build the neurological pathways and the habits around that skill set. Now I have confidence. When I see the microphone, when I see the camera, when I see the piano behind me, whenever I see these items, I look at them and I feel a burst of serotonin. It gives me the confidence to go utilize those instruments because I know how to use them. Same thing in anything in life. Whenever you've gone through the repetition of building the habits around it, where you're so good at it that you don't have to worry about it anymore. Like driving in great weather is one of the most subconscious things I do. And you don't really think about it, but imagine how much of a skill that really is. The amount of cognitive things that are going on at once. I once looked at how difficult is it to type on a keyboard. Imagine humans for thousands of years never used a keyboard, and now that's something that we can do while using language. And in American English, you have slang. There's so many things to it. Having the confidence in whatever you're thinking about, I feel is the serotonin component to it. And the one thing that really tipped me off to that was a long time ago when I was younger. Part of the 90s depression, ADHD craze, I was given some antidepressants. And whenever I heard what an SSRI was and how it functions and how it worked, it hooked me on the idea of serotonin being the key in all this. Why would you give somebody something that produces or releases or enhances serotonin to make them happy? That's kind of like the whole entire key going in the mechanism and turning it. So no one talks about that, though. It's all about dopamine detox and dopamine addiction and phone addiction and all that. And that's exactly what it is. It's all cheap dopamine. But the next one, euphoria, is it's something that I would consider on the pleasure spectrum. I don't know how appropriate that is to discuss here, but I strongly believe that one of the main reasons for being alive is to reproduce, and the human and mammals are programmed to do that. And it's ultimately the pinnacle of feeling fulfillment and feeling euphoria. For example, my spouse and I, that's a part of our lives, a very important part of our lives. And it's something that we don't have any issues whatsoever with our oxytocin levels, with our serotonin levels. We are completely aligned in our expectations regarding that. And I feel that if in relationships, if you aren't aligned with your partner in that, then it's a lot more detrimental than we really think it is. So those are kind of like the basic three that normal everyday life is. One other thing I'd like to touch on, dopamine in particular. One thing that I've learned is that whenever you create a new neurological pathway, you get that large burst of dopamine. And the next time you try doing the same thing, it's not going to feel the same way. And then you try doing it again, it won't feel the way it felt the first time ever again. You remember that first time because it was new, it was exciting. Happiness in its organic form revolves around being curious, having surprise, and having a resolution. And the more curious you are, the more open you are to new experience, the more new experiences you'll have, and the odds of them being positive resolutions are increased.
Okay. And tell me about a moment that you really, you mentioned the train journey, obviously, but outside of that, I suppose that was probably your happiness moment, that train journey, being on your own, not addicted and glued to your phone, no Wi-Fi, no internet, would be a happy moment for you. What was actually happening in that moment for you? Like, when you think about how your mind and your brain were operating at that time, what was, you talk about how you become an observer, technically, of your thoughts, which is something I've read in The Power of Now, and which is something that I can do, is control my thoughts. So tell me what was going on at that moment for you.
At that moment in time, there was a extreme cognitive dissonance between my ex-wife and I. And that moment, if I had to simplify it, it felt like freedom. It felt like freedom to think whatever I wanted to think and feel whatever I wanted to feel in a completely unjudged setting. And that gave me the opportunity to finally open up my mind and ponder how I really felt about the relationship, how I really felt about what it was going to cost if I decided that it wasn't worth it. I was pitted between the greatest thing in my life and wanting the rest of my life to be a life worth living, because I felt at that point it wasn't. So the emotional state that I was in, I was ready and willing to hear this new information. And when I heard it, it was the answer that I needed at that moment in time. And I feel like a lot of things in life, you have to be ready for them. Like, luck is just the moment meeting you being ready for it, really. And that was my moment to help me find a way to think myself through it and get past it.
Fair enough. Tell me about your state now, like where you are at now with happiness.
So my state now, I could talk about this for a very long time.
Go ahead.
So at the beginning of this year, I had sought out for this pursuit of happiness. And I had really thought that it would be around exercise, diet, and then like a mindset shift thing, like this very, very, very simple. And what I found out was that running many miles a day is very exhausting, and it exhausts your body, exhausts your mind. And everyone should work out like a half an hour a day. Absolutely get your heart rate up and do exercise. But what I was trying to do, it wasn't conducive with the rest of the goals that I wanted. It was sacrificing my mental capabilities. And I was like, wait a minute, you just found out a way that happiness isn't, because you are absolutely not happy right now. This is terrible. And then I was thinking, maybe I'd want to make these videos, or I'd want to do these various things. And I learned, no, that's also not in line with what you wanted to do. So I spend a lot of
It's
time.
interesting you say that, because I've seen that journey of yours where you used to talk about it, and I used to go, God, this guy's going to kill himself probably at the rate he's going. He needs to calm down.
Oh, yeah. Well, then my daughter was born too, so
Yes.
I've had my daughter occupying most of my time. But aside from that, I'll say that I'm at a place where I'm living the dream, like the life that I've dreamt up, and it really boils down to being married to the right person. It's not easy. I consider myself just lucky that I met the right person at the right time, and they're my person. And that gives me all of the comfort that a human being could ever want from another person. I know that I can trust her in any way, shape, or form. I know I can tell her anything that I need to tell her. I know that every boundary is respected. I know that it is the perfect image in reality of what I have in my head of who that person is and how they should treat me. And then I'm that person for them too, because I've had all this experience in my life of how to not be a good husband and how to not be a good boyfriend. And you learn so many things that you know how to behave, and we always learn more from each other. It's a progress thing. You don't see it as just one thing it's one thing and that's it. It's every day. It's progress in building this relationship. So for the first time in my life, I live in the world where I am with the exact right person for me. I do not allow anything into my head that is not educational for me. And what I mean is, if I'm interested in something, I am going to learn as much as I possibly can about it. That's what drives me. I am always trying to understand how things work. It's my favorite thing to do is think. It is really just to ponder whatever questions. If someone says it can't be answered, I want to try to think, how could it possibly be answered? And if that means inventing new frameworks and ways to think about it that no one's ever done before, then so be it. If it makes sense, then it makes sense. What I do on a daily basis, it's one of my worst habits is actually just being very accepting of the world and very going with, in a more of a go with the flow attitude, where you just accept everything as it happens. I am a stepfather of 2 autistic girls, and one who's neurotypical, and then I have my 2 children with my ex-wife, both neurotypical, and then my daughter now. And you would think that in that environment, it would just be utter chaos and uncomfortable, and it would just be a problem. Well, ever since I got into this whole neuroplasticity happy chemical thing, I see all these different people in my life as opportunities for oxytocin, an opportunity for building new relationships, new experiences. The best thing about the autistic girls is how different they are from everyone else. Whenever I met my current wife and her daughters, for the first time in my life, I met people that were so different than anyone else I'd ever met in my entire life. And that was the draw to them. What can I learn from these people? What can I experience with these people that I will never experience? Because they have a brain just like the rest of us, and we're all a part of this universe. If I'm going to understand this universe and how everything works, I need to also understand what's going on with these 2 girls. And they're both on the spectrum in very different ways. They're extremely different in the functions that they have versus what a neurotypical person would have, and how they're magnified in one way or another. It's extremely interesting to see what the human brain can do whenever it's not a perfect example. And I don't mean perfect in a, I mean neurotypical way. But I don't stress. What I do is I will make days where all I do is intentionally do things I don't want to do. So on the days that I don't want to do my finances, on the days that I don't want to have hard discussions with my wife, we just put those all in one day and basically just say, we're going to ruin this day. We're going to make all the bad decisions and do all the hard things. We are going to get the cognitive load out of the way, and that's it. Otherwise, I like to keep all my experiences either neutral or positive in one way or another. Um, the reality of it is, I don't have a really cognitive dissonance load. I don't have to go to work. I don't have to deal with traffic. I don't have to deal with the general public. I don't have to deal with any of the inconveniences of life. I'm only surrounded by people that I enjoy being around. And with my phone, I can go set it somewhere and not interact with it if I want to. I don't have to always have it attached to me and be at everyone's beckoning call. That's one boundary that I have. I don't always advertise it, but I don't have notifications on my phone. It will normally just be sitting somewhere, and I'll look at it when I feel like it. It's a habit that I just realized that while you're going through the day and you're trying to think of something, you'll hear the phone and you'll instantly stop doing what you were thinking about. And what if you had a really great idea and now it's gone and you may never get it back because of that? Because someone that has no idea just distracted it from you. And I'm very protective of my mind and what goes in it and how it works. It's always trying to progress it, have a better understanding of how the universe and how humanity works, while blending in the animalistic parts of being a human that I enjoy. It's, I like to be really smart, but there's a part of me where I'm still a kid. I still like to play with my kids. I still like to, my son, he'll say, I wish I had a brother, because he has 5 now sisters. And I look at him and I go, I wish I had a brother my same age whenever I was a kid. I know exactly what you mean. And I could put myself in my shoes of, that version of me in that time and go, what would I want to do with this kid if I was a kid too? So now we bonded in that way too. And, I have my own relationships with everybody. And I found out that I'm really driven by oxytocin. Whenever I was working for somebody else and dealing with the automotive industry, it wasn't really fulfilling. It wasn't a good end goal for me. It was just a means to an end. But being a stay-at-home father, it has been one of the most amazing things, because I get it. I understand it. I appreciate it. I missed my kids whenever I wasn't able to see them. And now I feel like I have the best of both worlds.
So how do you spend your days, David? Like, what do you do? Do you have a routine that helps you be happy and be at peace with yourself, so to speak?
So I have a few different versions of days. There's a highly strategic and tactical day, where it's you get up at a certain time, you do work for a certain amount of time, and it's a blend of interacting with the children. I have cameras set up at my desk too, so I can see if they're doing anything else, and I can't don't have line of sight. So it can be distracting, but there's days where it's just maximum focus, and all I'm trying to do is burn out all of my energy until I can't really focus anymore. And normally that would last like from 5 in the morning until 1 in the afternoon here. And that's kind of when I get bogged down and can't do it anymore. And that's just me being honest. Whenever I worked, I used to work from 7 to around 3 in the afternoon, and I would fast in the morning. I would get to work fasted. I would drink. I would have light snacks, but I wouldn't eat a full meal until I was ready to not really work for the rest of the day. And that's just what I figured out. No breaks, just hard focus. Just flow as hard as you possibly can. And then I have other days where it's more of a hybrid, where there's like other things going on during the day, so I try to cram in whatever productive things I can wherever it works out. And then there's other days where I like to quote the movie Office Space, when he says, "I would do nothing." And he says, "I did nothing, and it was everything I thought it would be." At least 2 of my days per week are nothing days. And they're just days where you just don't do anything. You do the absolute bare minimum and just relax, listen to music, think about something that you really enjoy. I've been taking videos of everything I've done for the past like almost 20 years now. And it's nice to be able to go back and kind of relive those greatest hits of your life. I have a computer that's built around just having all those memories. It's like having a key to my brain where I can go back to those memories, those times, and feel those emotions. One of the things that Tony Robbins said, and I heard and it blew my mind, was he said, "You feel what you focus on." And I always was curious about that. And then I realized it's totally possible. It's having all these little cues set up around to spark those ideas. And I have a bank of it, a library, whether it be in my head or in the physical reality, where I know how to jog all the good feelings out of me and, feel the best I possibly can. I have this habit where if I want to feel the absolute best I possibly can, there is the time that I proposed to my wife, my current wife. It was a day that I had dreamt of basically my entire life up to that point. And I took her to New York City and I proposed to her at the top of the World Trade Center. And that moment, it was almost like the pinnacle of my existence. Having a person that you could feel that way about with such certainty, I didn't think it was possible. And whenever I did that, it was with the absolute most intent another human being could ever have towards another human being. And that feeling alone is something that I've never felt before in my entire life. I hate to say it, but it's that love and appreciation for somebody that also feels it back for you while you're doing this gesture for them and they're appreciating it, and it's also the best day of their life. It is amazing to be able to know that someone loves you as much or even more than you love them, according to them. And I hate to say it's like an ego boost, but it fills my love bucket, and you just don't question it. And that day, her and I, we like to listen to a lot of music together. We have a lot of songs that we would say were our songs. And there was a song that I heard after that event that it's basically the key to those emotions. And I know if I'm not feeling in the best mood, I can put my headphones on and I can close my eyes and I can listen to that. And there's certain parts of it where the pitch changes in the song and you can feel your emotions, like it's almost like they rise up out of you, where you can feel like the goosebumps going from your stomach but through your body up your spine. And it's a very, I call it euphoric feeling. It's technically, I think it's called frisson, where your body will get goosebumps. And if I'm thinking about it hard enough, I can just push over the edge and start crying because of it. And it's that euphoria of being so happy. I hate the words of happy, but you're so fulfilled about how the expectation has worked out. And it's also the thing that you love and care about the most. I've been wanting to marry the right person since I was 13 years old. And whenever that right person finally is just there in front of you and you don't have a single doubt in your mind, that's an amazing experience.
What does the future hold for you? You've reached this sort of pinnacle where you are absolutely happy, absolutely calm. You only let in what you want to let into your mind. So you have great control of your mind. So what is next for you in terms of where do you go from here?
This is where it gets kind of dark. I came to some very real realizations when I was in New Zealand. New Zealand was...
One second. When did you travel to New Zealand again?
At the end of June, the beginning of July.
So it was this year?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. That trip to New Zealand was the last original dream that I had. From the moment I was a child up until that point, I have lived every single natural dream that has occurred in that span of time. The only one that remains is this whole building this business YouTube presence one way or another. The focus of my mind is about 90% on that, and how to deliver a product that is actually something that people would want. And I'm navigating the realities of that, where no one is specifically looking for what I'm doing. And I don't want to fall into the categories that it is close to. I want to be my own thing. I want to be the leader in consciousness, a leader in, optimal experience, or optimal consciousness experience. I want people to understand how to use their consciousness. I don't want to tell you a bunch of tips and tricks about how to do things. I want to say, this is your consciousness. We're going to think about it for the first time in your entire life. What is it like to actually experience that? And what can you do? What tools do you have available to you that I've spent all these years learning how to leverage that no one else has ever thought of? is one thing about me is I'm not afraid to look inside and find out what's wrong with me and work on it. I've always, one of the worst and best things about me is if you've ever met anybody, they'll tell you that he's not a violent or loud person. He implodes. Whenever I get mad, I don't get mad at the person or the circumstance or anybody except myself. I get mad because I got mad. And I go, what did I do wrong in order to make myself feel that way? Most people don't do that. They want to blame everything else in the entire world aside from themselves. But that's a habit that I have because I realize that everything that I feel is inside. Another Les Brown quote, you can... there's no enemy outside if there's no enemy within. That one always resonated with me because it is true. Everything that you give the world is something that you gave it. People aren't going to make up things and imagine things that you haven't given them some input whatsoever. You know, if you never say anything, they can't put words in your mouth. If they can't assume things about you if you don't give them anything, any inputs. One thing I learned, and it's not necessarily be guarded, but be genuine, and don't be afraid whenever other people have a problem with the way that you are because their expectations aren't the same as yours. It's all relative and personal, and not personal against you, but just you don't match their copy of what they want the world to be, and that's not your problem.
Now, you mentioned consciousness and how you want people to use their consciousness for their benefits, I guess, and make a better life for themselves.
Yeah.
So what is your definition then of consciousness?
So imagine that there's 86,400 seconds in a day. And each one of those seconds is a moment of thought that you can have. And that thought is going to be made up of any of the emotions that are possible in your mind. It's going to be a combination of that. It could be just raw one of them, or it could be a blend. Some situations could feel good, but also feel bad at the same time. Some can be only stress, some can be only happy. And your brain in an instant is going to go, here's all 5 senses, here's the associated feelings with it, and here is a numerical value, a percentage of success the next time that we try this event. So if you put your hand in a fire, you're going to get a negative value of 100. It's going to say, that's all cortisol and pain. You do not want to do that ever again. And you're going to know with 100% certainty that's going to burn you. Now, if I go out on a date with a girl and we talk and everything seems to be going good, and then she doesn't call me again, I'm not going to have good certainty about how that went. I'm not going to have any clue. I would have taken all of her, her smiles, her looks away, her body language in every single way, the words she used, the tone, and subconsciously come up with a prediction of how did that actually go. Everyone does it. The human brain, I'm definitely summarizing and making it simple, but our natural instincts, food, shelter, and seeking. I'm watching it right now. My daughter, she's enough to seek. She crawls all over the place now. The human mind is always looking for something else. And we're always looking to stay safe. So we know subconsciously that the likelihood of things happening is based on that. And it's just the simplest version of what I think thought is. And when that thought comes through, then your subconscious puts it into like a framework of like thoughts and then goes, that's the same one as you've had before. We don't need that one. Or it goes, oh, this one's totally new. What is that relevant to? What can that help us with? And then you start building the frameworks. I almost feel as though your entire personality or the entire thing that makes you, how you define yourself, is just this lattice of thoughts of experience and their associated values. Like if a child was raised without parents that loved them and they were neglected, they're going to feel extreme oxytocin deficiency. They're going to feel maximum cortisol. They're going to feel this large cognitive dissonance basically their entire life because they never had that human need filled. And they're not going to trust people going forward. They're going to make habits where they're just antisocial because they don't want to get hurt ever again. And people may see that as they're introverted, they're not a people person, but really they have this deep down pain that they need to resolve and come up with some type of other construct in order to get past it. And depending on how firm you are on that ego and those beliefs, some people aren't able to let go of it. One thing that I think is very interesting about the human mind that I would like to introduce to people is that imagine, and this is just for a visual, easy way to put it, imagine if you could, on purpose, choose what to do with all those seconds throughout the day. How many of those would you allocate to pleasure? How much would you allocate to dopamine? How much would you allocate to serotonin? How much would you allocate to oxytocin? Because we all need those things. Not necessarily on a daily basis, but on a relatively recurring basis to be happy, functioning human beings. And whenever you neglect one or the other, an imbalance occurs and you start to feel stressed about it, and you may not even know what's going on. You may not feel any connection with somebody because you've been so busy at work that you haven't spent time with your family or your friends, and you may just need to do that. Or maybe you've only been around other people and you need to get some alone time and work on a hobby of yours. Sometimes you need that serotonin moment. One thing I would want to help people do is understand what is their happy language. Read the 5 love languages, and the more that I've thought about this, there are people that they really generate. I mean, they gravitate towards certain hormones more than others. Like, for example, my wife is the most empathetic person I've ever met in my entire life. She will put everyone in front of herself, and she genuinely cares. She genuinely cares more about other people than herself than I've ever seen in my entire life. And her wiring is that of somebody that is a caregiver, and they thrive on that oxytocin. They thrive on it to such an extent where that's about, I predict, about 90% of what makes her run. And there's nothing wrong with that. She enjoys her life and she enjoys what she does. I'm more of like 60% oxytocin, and then the other bit is serotonin. I need my blend of human interaction and the love of my life, but I also need my alone time. I need my time to be free in my own world, in my head, and work on whatever I want to work on, but I also need that love. And I think that everyone has a balance that they need to strive for. And if I were working with somebody, that's what I would help them find, is what do they really get enjoyment out of, and remove the societal constructs and those limitations and go, if you were the only person left in the world and you could arrange it however you want and do whatever you want, what would that be? And then we could practice and find out what's working, what isn't, and refine, and you could ultimately come up with a week or a month-long schedule of do these things, and ultimately you should be able to have more positive experiences than negative ones. And that should help you build your subconscious into the subconscious that is always helpful instead of negative. Or it's basically like redefining yourself, really, intentionally.
Fair enough. Now, I practice spirituality, and a lot of spirituality and a lot of what spirituality teaches us is that you look internally for happiness and you focus on yourself internally.
Yeah.
And correct me if I'm wrong here, but from what I see, you look at happiness from the 4 sort of chemicals, happy chemicals that you've been talking about, which is to look at things externally rather than internally. Is that correct? Or do you sort of have a balance for both looking internally versus the experiences you take in from externally?
Imagine that inside of your mind, it's a universe that has its own rules, it has its own expectations. If that one is exactly the one that you love to live in, you don't necessarily need the outside one. It's the outside one that gives us all of the, I guess, cues in order to make life as a human being worth living. Because it really wouldn't be any fun to just live in your head all the entire time and not experience the environment. It absolutely is a balance of the two. The one thing that it's very difficult about the external is you have to accept that you can't control it. Like, in The Power of Now, when they talk about the 3 choices, accept, resist, retreat, the more you build the inside world to be ready for these choices, and you accept as much as possible, but you have to genuinely feel it and mean it. Whenever I would call it as close to enlightenment as I feel like I can get, it doesn't feel like anything. It doesn't feel like happy. It doesn't feel like euphoria. It doesn't. It's just mere observation and being one with everything, essentially, and not having an opinion.
It's interesting you say that, because there's a Zen, I don't know, it's a Buddhist quote, and it says, and it's very interesting: before enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. After enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. So essentially, I find it interesting because people feel that reaching enlightenment means that you change and you experience this euphoric moment. But essentially, for me, it's always been about clarity.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
yeah, and the no mind state
Yes.
that even the Power of Now actually talks about is actually getting your mind under control, so much so that your thinking changes, and you only use your thoughts when it's important to use them.
Yep.
Otherwise, it's a no mind state that actually enables you to be creative. Now, you mentioned your trip to New Zealand just a little bit earlier. You mentioned that it completely changed your thought and your perception. You probably had that moment where you thought, oh my God, this is what I want to do. So what was that? Like, what was the key, the catalyst to it? Because for me, yes, I do experience glimpses of enlightenment. I'm probably at a very peaceful state at the moment, which is good. It's blissful. And I find that I'm more internal based than external. So I'm trying to balance at the moment my internal, and it's been like that for a month actually. I'm trying to balance my internal feelings and thoughts and knowing that I'm at peace versus trying to help people externally as well. So that's why I asked you that question on, how do you balance it? Like, internally, you're so at peace, but do you feel like you're seeking happiness from outside as well?
This is kind of a weird way to put it. And a friend of mine and I were having a discussion similar to this before, where he said, if your wife left you, what would you do? And the way that I put it is, if my wife left me, that person would not be the person that I married, because her mental state, who she is mentally, would never do that. And if I had her sitting here, she would say the exact same thing. So we're talking about a world that is so wild and different from the one that I have in my mind that is the right one. And if that doesn't work out, I have no issue with staying single and not engaging in that and dedicating my life basically to my children at that point. I don't have any issue with that. And I think that having that peace and knowing that if the worst case scenario happens, you already have a plan and you already know how you're going to process and go through it. It will absolutely be traumatic and one of the most terrible things you could experience, like the death of a loved one. That will naturally happen. But I would see it as an opportunity for growth, and that I learned a lesson and move forward and develop a new expectation of what should be happening in the world, in my versus what I think should be happening in my head. And that's really all you can do to maintain this balance, where you can be calm and comfortable, is recognize that you don't have control, and sometimes the best you can do is balance your own mind to accommodate.
Look, David, I'd like to thank you for your time today. I appreciate the conversation we've really had. It's been great to understand your thoughts around happiness, and I'll probably leave a link to your YouTube channel so people can actually visit it, because I think you're doing some exciting stuff more recently with consciousness, and also happiness as well, and the way you're taking your courses and various things forward. So it's really good. I'm really looking forward to it, actually.
I am too. It's something I've been dreaming about, and this is the final dream. I hate to put it that way, but that's really what it is for me. And maybe something else will come up, but right now, this is the only thing in my life that I have to work for. Everything else is the exact way that I enjoy it while it lasts, because nothing's forever.
That's true. Impermanence. All right, David. Thank you.
Yep, no problem.